Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone. My name is Isha Sarah Snow, and I am a sociology and psychology undergraduate at Washington State University, Vancouver. Today, I invite you to explore an idea that challenges the very foundations of how we think about consciousness. While current scientific methods reject non-local consciousness as untestable, I propose that the problem may not lie in the phenomenon itself, but in the paradigm we're using to study it. By shifting from binary models of cognition to relational frameworks, we open the door to understanding consciousness not as a product isolated within the brain, but as an emergent field of interconnected relations. This presentation will offer conceptual foundation for this shift, supported by both personal lived experience and measurable outcomes, and framed within a broader call for the next evolution of science. Mainstream science has long rejected the idea of non-local consciousness as untestable or even nonsensical. But what if it's not the phenomenon that's flawed? What if it's the paradigm that can't perceive it? I want to challenge a foundational assumption that the paranormal is fundamentally normal, but science lacks the adequate tools to measure supernatural phenomena specifically because all of the tools that science can create are based on a closed and linear framework. This talk isn't about proving non-local consciousness. It's more about rethinking the framework that we use to define what's real and what's testable. Doing so would make the unknown known. This presentation provides a new cognitive framework and the shift needed for the James Randi Educational Foundation's $1 million Paranormal Challenge to reconsider its evaluation of non-physical data. Empirical science demands falsifiability. James Randi's challenge offered $1 million for proof of supernatural claims, but so far no one has succeeded. The challenge was originally offered in 1964 as $1,000 and later increased to $1 million. Despite numerous applicants over the years, the prize has remained unclaimed. In 2015, the JREF terminated their challenge and became a grant-making foundation. But maybe the issue wasn't whether the phenomenon was real, but whether our current tools are capable of detecting it. René Descartes split mind from body, self from other. This dualism underpins modern science, but limits our understanding of consciousness. It dismisses relation, intuition, and entanglement, which are essential aspects of quantum reality. In my previous slideshow presentation called The Grammar of Healing: Reclaiming Language as a Living Mirror, I explored how the process of colonization replaced indigenous relational language and culture with binary communication and cognition. The same linguistic structure responsible for colonizing indigenous minds and cultures is also the same language that created René Descartes' dualistic philosophy. Cartesian dualism was a product of the binary logic embedded within his language. Descartes' emphasis on reason, clarity of thought, and the systematic approach to knowledge contributed to the development of the scientific method which separates individual consciousness from the greater field. This field cannot be measured by empirical binary means, and until now has remained unproven because it must be experienced relationally. Binary logic divorces content from context, and relational logic repairs this rupture in our ability to perceive reality as it is and not how we think it should be. Western linguistic and social frameworks artificially impose a binary way of perceiving and understanding the world that has been fitted over the true relational field. This creates a perceived separation or self-identification that we refer to as our ego. Put in more mathematical terms, a binary framework keeps our awareness situated at a 0 point, placing us outside of the relational field, which remains at infinite because its base number is 1. Moving from binary to a relational field unifies physics with consciousness by creating spirals where 3 indicates the emergence of relationality and a third field between self and other. When everything is connected, isolating variables distorts the whole, which is potentially one reason why binary data struggles with the unquantifiable. The scientific method excels with material systems but struggles with complex emergent phenomena like consciousness and the paranormal. We need tools that can account for observer influence and systemic entanglement. Newtonian reductionism, which posits that complex phenomena can be explained by simpler fundamental laws, built upon and extended the ideas of René Descartes. Nikola Tesla developed a mathematical 369 code, which he considered fundamental to the universe's structure and workings. While not a scientific theory, it challenged Newtonian reductionism by suggesting a more holistic view of the universe where numbers and energy patterns are interconnected. It described what a harmonic field looks like and was a geometric description of relational consciousness, whereas my relational field density formula describes relational physics mathematically and shows us how relational fields intensify or collapse. My formula essentially provides a bridge to Tesla's sacred geometrical world. A relational field is not a thing, but a web of influence. Just like gravitational or electromagnetic fields, consciousness may arise through relational resonance rather than isolated neurons. Skeptics of paranormal phenomenon state that not a single testable parameter has confirmed non-local consciousness, but the idea of non-local consciousness, which suggests consciousness isn't solely confined to the brain or body, is gaining traction in scientific research. It is still considered a largely theoretical concept specifically because these ideas are being explored from the very binary mechanism that separates us from the greater awareness. Different conceptual models would allow for another type of testability to emerge if our systems of thought were to shift the scientific method itself to a more relational framework based on already available systems theories. The mind may be non-local and field-based, but our current tools may be too narrow to detect it. I am proposing that the scientific method itself isn't actually fixed, but is dependent upon a binary cognitive framework that has evolved historically alongside humanity. A paradigm that is grounded in non-local consciousness and relational rather than rational logic could allow for the study of consciousness as a field phenomenon rather than an isolated brain and biology-bound event. I have previously explored the concept of consciousness as a non-localized field and how humans can access it in my paper titled The Sacred Divergence, or How Autism is Guiding Humanity Back to Its Forgotten Ways, Neurodiversity, Morphic Fields, and the Re-indigenization of Human Consciousness. I have made preprints of this paper available for review on my ResearchGate profile. This new paradigm allows for the perception and measurement of what we currently label paranormal phenomenon. This is a call to evolve our frameworks, not reject our current tools. In my personal healing journey, while processing my individual traumas, I observed changes that cannot be fully explained through individual psychology alone. These moments of intuitive synchronicity, emotional resonance, and shared breakthroughs suggest that healing is not occurring in isolation, but within a shared relational field. My family's lived experiences, while somewhat anecdotal, offer real-life insight into the possibility that consciousness operates non-locally and relationally. My experiences have shown me that something extraordinary, a relational, non-local effect, appears to be happening outside of classical material explanations. I have personally witnessed intuitive synchronicities, unexplained academic and behavioral leaps, and personal psychological transformation that correlates directly with relational field healing. These are phenomena beyond current scientific models, aligning with the spirit of what the Randi challenge was asking, to demonstrate an effect that conventional science cannot alone explain. Before actively attempting to heal my trauma, I struggled for years, dropping out of college multiple times, becoming permanently disabled, and was unable to work. After reconnecting to what I understand is a relational field of nonlocal consciousness, my life completely transformed. Through secure attachment and deep relational attunement, I was able to recover my cognitive clarity, return to school, and have since earned academic honors, awards, and recognition. I'm now producing original research and theory that bridges trauma, consciousness, and social systems, which demonstrates the existence of non-local consciousness and shows how healing at the relational level can unlock human potential and catalyze collective transformation. By applying what I learned about relational fields and non-local consciousness, I was able to support measurable growth in my family, particularly in my son. His school diagnostic tool, iReady, showed he had achieved 329% of typical annual growth, surpassing the chart's measurable limits, and made 128% personal progress in the same period. Additionally, an individual collaborative formulation report called a CANS assessment taken by his therapy team over a year's period documented a 66.6% reduction in problematic behaviors within the first 90 days, with stability maintained thereafter. The first and longest line in this top image shows data that was measured on February 26 of 2024. It measures at a 3, which is significant because 90 days after and for every measurement following, these behaviors drop down to a 1. Here we can see the 66.6% reduction in behaviors, which correspond to the 329% jump in measurable growth. These real-world, measurable outcomes from school diagnostics and psychological evaluations both show dramatic changes that correlate with relational healing, leading to greater gains in individual consciousness and awareness. This shows subjective and objective support for my hypothesis, both of which are needed when considering paradigm-shifting ideas. My evidence is powerful, but the Randi challenge was framed in a way that prevents relational, field-based phenomena from qualifying because such phenomena are emergent, relational, and not easily isolated. The challenge assumed reality is made of separable parts and effects that must be mechanically reproducible in isolation. I'm showing here that consciousness and healing are relational and field-based, inherently dynamic, systemic, and emergent, meaning they can't be reduced to isolated triggers without destroying the relational context that makes them work. In a very real sense, I am critiquing the assumptions of the Randi challenge itself and not failing to meet them. All science begins in speculation. Einstein and Galileo started with visions, not data. Without conceptual expansion, new science cannot emerge. I have genuine, powerful evidence of relational field effects. It might not win the James Randi $1 million prize, but only because the challenge was designed around outdated, binary, mechanistic assumptions that relational fields by definition transcend. However, my work here shows that the Randi framework is itself insufficient to study relational consciousness, which may explain why the prize has never been claimed. While this evidence may not meet the strict conditions of the James Randi $1 million Paranormal Challenge, which required isolated, repeatable demonstrations under materialist assumptions, that does not mean that it lacks scientific value. Rather, it reveals the limitations of that very framework. Relational phenomena like consciousness, trauma healing, and emotional resonance are emergent, field-based, and context-dependent. They cannot be reduced to mechanistic binary triggers without collapsing the system in which they arise. My work challenges us to reconsider what counts as evidence and invites the scientific community to develop methods capable of measuring relational fields. This is not a supernatural claim, it's a paradigm shift towards holistic science. My work as a social scientist at Washington State University integrates trauma-informed neuroscience, polyvagal attachment and systems theories, quantum cosmology, and relational cognition. I have used an interdisciplinary approach to map a meta-framework of studies which sits at the intersection of psychology, sociology, linguistics, and theoretical physics. My relational field theory will expand what science considers testable, allowing for the paranormal to become normalized. In this presentation, I have argued that the mind-body split caused by Descartes has led to mechanistic binary models of cognition that suppress relational, interconnected intelligence. I point out that modern empirical science, built on linear causality and Newtonian reductionism, struggles to study consciousness because it assumes separability, missing relational phenomena like nonlocal consciousness. Essentially, the ego cannot understand what's outside of the ego because the ego keeps itself separated. I explained how binary cognition, such as zero versus one and self versus other, limits our understanding, while relational cognition, like interdependence and systems thinking, open new pathways for exploring consciousness and reality. And I've proposed that consciousness might be a field phenomenon, not something produced by the brain, but accessed through it, akin to how quantum fields behave. Rather than claiming proof, I've constructed a new conceptual map following in the tradition of Galileo, Darwin, and Einstein to allow future empirical methods and eventually test these relational field models. The limits of our method are not the limits of reality. Let's evolve our maps and embrace science as a living dialogue with the unknown. The James Randi challenge demanded extraordinary proof under the assumption that reality behaves mechanistically and can be tested through isolated, repeatable events. But relational fields like consciousness, healing, or emotional attunement, and paranormal events are emergent, interdependent, and contextual. The very design of the Randi challenge excludes these dynamics. Rather than attempting to win a challenge rooted in outdated premises, my work proposes a paradigm shift, one that acknowledges the limitations of reductionism and invites science to evolve towards frameworks capable of detecting and honoring relational phenomena. Here are some of the sources that were mentioned in this presentation, but for a full and comprehensive bibliography, I would recommend reading my ResearchGate papers or my blog at spirolateral.org. I hope that you have found this slideshow presentation informative and would welcome any feedback on my ideas. I am open to future collaborations, so please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I have listed my contact information here as well. Thank you very much for listening and for considering my perspective.